Today I am in downtown Indianapolis. I'm actually truly on the border of it. I'm on Mass Ave right now. And I'm gonna talk about three of the things that, even though I really like Indianapolis, there's a lot about it that I wouldn't change and of course couldn't change. Three things that I would change. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Living in Indianapolis team and channel. Welcome back. If it's your first time here, then welcome to the channel. So on this channel, we talk about all things Indianapolis and all the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis. And if you have questions about any of those places at all, or you are at the point where you need help with your relocation, you're moving to the Indianapolis metro, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with any of those questions that you have, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. So Mass Ave, it's called Massachusetts Avenue, the actual street name. I'm coming up here on a intersection that has a lot, 6 streets coming into it. So I have to make sure I'm watching. This part of the city is just one of my favorite parts of the city. And there are lots of parts of the city that I wouldn't change. And there's a lot about the city that I wouldn't change. And there are, of course, like I said at the beginning, things that you can't change. So I've heard people complain, and actually even complain to me, that, oh, it's something that you guys don't have beaches, you don't have mountains. No, of course not. We don't have any of those things. Those are kind of no-duh things, and we're not changing those at all. Most of the country doesn't have mountains. Most of the country doesn't have beaches. We know where all of those things are. So those are not the things that I'm talking about to change here in Indianapolis. I'm talking about some smaller things. And really, this first point is probably a larger thing. This point has come from a lot of conversations that I've had with people over the years, and had one actually just this morning with somebody and yesterday with somebody. So the first thing that I would change about Indianapolis is its reputation as being a dangerous city. And every larger city, we could get into this argument whether Indianapolis is a big city or it's a medium-sized city, or just not quite the definition of a big city. A lot of people say 1 million people. You gotta have at least that to be a big city. Indianapolis does not have 1 million people. It's just over 900,000, so it's pretty close to it, but the whole metro, there's 2 million, so it's substantial. There's definitely a lot of people around, and over 900,000 in Indianapolis itself is still pretty substantial. There's no doubt about that. But you see on the news constantly, or you'll see ratings across the country, just about Indianapolis being a dangerous city. And there are lots of cities actually that have a reputation like that. And I would say to have all of Indianapolis, every part of it, being considered dangerous is actually dangerous. Most of Indianapolis is not dangerous. I am right here along Mass Ave. Now, there aren't that many people out, and people would comment about that. Where are all the people? Well, it's a very early Tuesday morning. There's not a lot going on out here, but along Mass Ave, this is close to downtown proper, and you can kind of see some of the buildings back there behind me, where downtown is. This whole area, all of downtown, is there crime? Absolutely. There are car break-ins, definitely. There's small crime like that, I think, in really crowded areas of just about any city. And I don't think that's the type of crime that most people are really worried about anyway. Most people are really worried about the violent crime, and where is that? So there are absolutely places in Indianapolis that I would consider dangerous. I would go maybe into those parts of the city during the day. If I had to stop and get gas or something like that, it was 2 in the afternoon, maybe I would do that. But if it was 2 in the morning, I'm probably not doing that. Along this whole strip, along Mass Ave, there are so many people out here, usually during the week, and then especially on the weekends. My wife and I were actually just here not that long ago. We ate at Livery Restaurant on College, and then we went downtown to see an Indianapolis Indians game, and we did that the week before with our kids. Lots and lots of people around, and it's just not necessarily the conditions for being dangerous, but some of those dangerous parts of Indianapolis, they're not even dangerous necessarily all of the time. Most of the time it's gonna happen at night, and most of the time anything violent, anything bad is gonna happen probably between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., somewhere in there. And even crime can happen in this part of the city where there are still lots of people, and lots of restaurants, lots of culture, probably between those hours. And, you know, if of course you remember growing up, your mom always said nothing good ever happens past midnight. Well, it's not always the case. Of course, after midnight, you could just be fine. But you start pushing it if you're getting off into some strange areas that you don't know and it's 2 in the morning. I mean, that's just not a smart move probably in any city. And Indianapolis is definitely included in that. But when you start studying a lot of the violent crime, the kind of crime that everybody's worried about, even in the most dangerous spots, most of the time, that is a type of crime where people know each other, it's drug related a lot of times, or it's related to something that's already not so good. So I would say if you're living in a place like this, or if you're living in a huge swath of Indianapolis, an enormous swath, geographically, Indianapolis is really quite big. If you're talking about the mileage from one side to the other, there's a lot of space and a tremendous number of places that I would say you're probably safe in all of those places. You could, of course, get in a situation where it's just bad timing, the wrong time. That could happen in any place in the entire world. It's not statistically likely to happen. So, my comfort, I would live anywhere around here, no problem. I wouldn't live down in this area with my kids, even though some people do, just because it's not a real good fit for us. We like some space, a yard, and I don't want to have to worry about traffic all of the time, and I want my kids to ride their bikes and just not have to worry about all of that. That would be the kind of safety that I would be most concerned about as far as a family from that perspective. But my wife has lived down here by herself back in her days when she was single. I've lived in this area. I've lived all over Indianapolis, and I've never had one particular time where I was considered, or I consider myself worried about crime and worried about my safety. Just was smart, just like you should be in every big city. But of course there's crime here. I just think that calling all of Indianapolis dangerous is just not fair. Second thing that I would love to see, although I know this is wildly complicated, it's of course controversial, it's a lot of things actually that prevent it from happening, and cost as well, is I would love to see more public transportation. Indianapolis has a bus system, but it's pretty limited to the city of Indianapolis, and even within the city of Indianapolis, it's fairly limited too. So there's, right over here behind me, you could see a little bus stop. I think you can see that, right over there. And it's around downtown, major bus station, of course, downtown, but it's not horribly or tremendously efficient and difficult. And honestly, I've never even used the bus system here in Indianapolis. So it is extremely car dependent, very car heavy. And you know, it's probably that way really across the entire country for the most part, in most cities. If you want to go from where you live directly to another place, well, that's going to require a car. If you try to use public transportation and get somewhere specific, it's going to take a little bit of work to get to the public transportation, and then where they drop you off, it may not be exactly where you want to end up, of course. So as I said before, wife and I came down here to have dinner, and then we went over to an Indianapolis Indians game at Victory Field. So we had to drive to the restaurant, and then we had to get in our car and drive over to Victory Field. It would be pretty cool to have a rail system, at least somewhere close to where we live, outside of Indianapolis. Now that's in Greenfield, out to the east, so I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon. But let's say you live in a more populated area, like on the south side. Let's say you lived in Greenwood, or if you lived in Carmel to the north, or Fishers to the northeast, which have a lot of people. And a rail system has certainly been talked about with places like that, especially in Fishers. There was a rail already coming from Fishers into Indianapolis. They had a train there years and years ago, and they had it operating actually fairly recently. All the tracks are gone now. That's a nickel plate trail. But they had it operating even fairly recently, where you could jump on that train in downtown Fishers and go down to the state fair, which was pretty cool. So you didn't have to worry about parking. You didn't have to worry about really much of anything. Once you jumped on that train, it took you right to where you wanted to go. But it's not always going to be the case. So parking is a thing that I'd like to avoid a lot of times, because you can see all up and down here, there's plenty of parking and a lot of space available, but you have to pay to park pretty much everywhere. In downtown Indianapolis, you don't have to outside of downtown Indianapolis, but public transportation kind of take care of that. It doesn't look like there's much of a parking issue here right now, because again, it's pretty early in the morning on a Tuesday, so not a lot of people out here demanding the parking. But you come here on a Friday night or a Thursday night or a Saturday night or a Saturday or a Sunday, you're going to not run into a parking problem, but it's going to be a concern. You might not just get the spot that you want. You might have to, I don't know, park in a garage somewhere or park on the street somewhere and walk a little bit over to where it is that you're trying to go. And public transportation would really be the same thing with that. It's just that you don't have to worry about your car. So, but if you go to dinner, you go to a ball game, you have a beer, you have 2 beers, something like that, that's a worry. You don't want to be driving with all of that. It's kind of nice to have someone else do the driving for you. But the cost of that is tremendous, and actually having a rail system or something go through properties, that is a problem. There's not a lot of availability for that. So a really robust, comprehensive public transportation system in Indianapolis is probably never happening. And to have a super comprehensive, like I said, just system in any larger city like Chicago or New York, something like that. In New York, very comprehensive, but it's not exactly perfect. It's still some work to use it, definitely, but it's probably the most comprehensive system that we have, or best system that we have in the United States, and nobody's going to get to that level. Just nobody will. It doesn't matter if you've got a city of 8-10 million people, something like that. It's just probably not happening. It's really set up for it there, more so than a place like this. The square mileage of Indianapolis beats out New York City by quite a bit. It's just more spread out. It's just harder to do. So it's one thing that I would change, though, because there are plenty of times where I know personally I would use it, but there are other times, of course, that I wouldn't as well. And while it's maybe shameful to say, I like the car. I like the ability to have that flexibility of just going directly to where I want and need to be. All right, the next thing I would change, this is the last point, and this is definitely a controversial one, because when this actually happened years ago, it caused a giant stir. So we are on Eastern time, and we live on the edge of the Eastern time zone. the western edge of it. And somebody always has to live on the edges of each of these time zones. But if you go just to the north and barely west, not too far to the west at all, you have Chicago. And Chicago is on the far eastern edge of the central time zone. But the big controversy is who should we align with? Because we're gonna go on to daylight savings time, which means our clocks go backwards in the fall and they go forwards in the spring. So we have this standard time and daylight time, which confuses a lot of people for sure. But right now, as I'm shooting this, we're on daylight time. So we just sprung our clocks forward in the spring. But it was who to align with, because we were one of the last places in the entire country not to observe daylight savings time, where we never switched our clocks, which was kind of wild because where I'm from was on Central, and then Indianapolis. It was just a whole confusing thing, because when we didn't switch, it flip-flopped who you were aligned with, because they did switch. So we wanted to get rid of all of that confusion and just switch when everybody else switched, so we all stayed on the same time, because it was kind of crazy there during certain parts of the year. So we were trying to figure out who we were going to align with, New York or Chicago. A lot of people wanted to go with New York. A lot of people wanted, of course, to go with Chicago, just because we're so close to Chicago. I mean, to get to Chicago, it's not much over 2 hours. If you want to get into downtown, like right into downtown, of course it's longer than that. It's 2.5 hours at least, maybe 3 if the traffic's really bad, but let's say 2.5 hours. That's not very far. And it's mostly just north, a little bit west. But we went to Eastern, and so that means great things for some people and annoyances for others. It's in the annoyance category for me, because in the summer, when we did this, I didn't have kids, but then when we had kids, oh man, it gets dark so late in the summer. It's just berserk. It's absolutely crazy when you realize what time it is sometimes, and it's still extremely light out. Now, for outdoor restaurants and golf courses and all kinds of places that can really take advantage of more daylight, fantastic for them. And in the winter for us, it doesn't get dark until 5:30, something like that, in the dead middle of winter. So late December, early January. And on a cloudy day, it might be earlier than that. If we were on Central, it'd be more like 4:15, it's dark, which would be pretty early. I know that would be hard to get through. But you never really think about harder to get through in the summer, and trying to put your kids to bed, let's say at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, when it's late June, early July, and the sun doesn't even set until close to 9:45 or so, in between 9:45 and 9:35, something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers. It is late. And then there are all these different twilights. You have astronomical twilight, you've got nautical twilight, and you have civil twilight. And civil twilight is when there's still some light out, but street lights and things like that, they need to start popping on. And civil twilight is like 9:50, right in there, 9:49, I think, something like that. So it is almost 10 o'clock, and it's just now to the point where it's getting a little dark. Some of the exterior lights are going to start popping on. But when you look in the sky, there's still going to be some light in the sky at almost 10 o'clock. July 4th, fireworks, you can't start those until after 10 o'clock if you want it to be dark. So if you're going to a public display, something like that, it's going to be after 10 o'clock at night before you can actually start those fireworks, which is pretty insane. So astronomical twilight, though, is really when it's dark enough to start observing stars and doing some astronomical observations. That's after 11. That's like 11:08. And then nautical twilight, which is technically when the sun is below the horizon. I think it's 12 degrees, but it's well enough below the horizon to where you can start navigating by the stars. That's 10:30. But all those things are very technical. What you're going to notice on a day-to-day basis is that June 21st, June 22nd, all the way through the end of June into early July, you're going to be out on a clear day clear like it is right now, and think it's 9:45 and the sun has just set. So there is still a lot of light in the sky. That is weird, I think. And for me personally, I like to get some darkness in before I go to bed. Now, if you're going into the house at 10 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock is because it's just now getting dark, and you want to hang out for a little bit and kind of unwind before you go to bed, 11:30, it catches up really fast. So in the summer, I feel like being on that Eastern time zone, and then also things are on later. So if you wanted to watch a game like Monday Night Football or something, Monday Night Football is not going to come on until after 8:30. And so that's going to be really late. If you wanted to catch anything prime time, it's always going to come on late. Any kind of game, like any live thing, the way we watch TV, of course, anymore, trash truck going by, we don't have to worry too much about that, but anything like that, it's always going to be later. But in the summer, it just feels like things move faster. They move faster because you can go so much further into the day before it starts to feel late at all, and you just probably will tend to get a little less sleep because there's so much more daylight deeper into the day. Anyway, I just feel like it's one of the things that is a little unnatural. I really wish we were on Central. I know that we would pay the price in the winter for it getting darker earlier. I know there'd be a trade-off, but I still feel like it's a little bit goofy to have the light so deep into the evening in the summer. But I'm on one side of the argument. There are people certainly on the other side of the argument. It's just one of those things that I would change. There you go. There are 3 things that I would change about Indianapolis. Some you can do, some you can't, unfortunately. But there are other things I would change. But let me know what you might change in the comments below, and we'll see if we can get a conversation started and maybe even change some of those things. Who knows? So those are 3, and we'll catch you in the next one.